if you have property in more than one state, you really need to see an estate planning lawyer. Why is that? Because probate must occur in each state where you own real property, unless you have taken steps to avoid that. So what do I mean by that? Well, real property is your home. It's titled. If you need to transfer title from the decedent to whomever is inheriting, and this property is going under a probate, you need to open up a probate, for example, in Washington, in Idaho, in California, wherever the asset is, there needs to be a probate. Now, there are ways to avoid that. How can you do that? There's a number of ways. In a lot of states, you can do what's called a transfer on death deed. So let's say most of your assets in Washington, and let's say through the estate planning lawyer, it was determined that probate made a lot of sense to protect assets. You want to protect assets in Washington, so there's going to be a probate. But you also have property in another jurisdiction, another state. We can avoid probate in that other state if they have what's called a transfer on death deed, which is kind of just like a beneficiary designation on a life insurance policy, basically, pay on death on bank account type thing. It says, on my death, this real property now is going to be this other person's. That's called a transfer on death deed. So that's a really simple way to avoid probate in a different state. Another way to avoid probate in a different state is to put that asset that's in the other state in a revocable living trust. So it could be that your estate plan is set up with everything's in the revocable living trust, or it could be that your estate plan is set up only to put out-of-state property into that revocable living trust. Which route is the best really depends on what your goals are, what your assets look like. Talk to your estate planning lawyer about which is best. But don't be surprised that your estate planning lawyer might recommend that you actually have a combination of have a will with an asset protection trust because you live in Washington. It's the only way we can protect assets for your surviving spouse against long-term care costs. But you have property that's in another jurisdiction. We can either transfer on death, do a deed. Oh, and by the way, that transfer on death deed will have to be done by a lawyer licensed in that other jurisdiction, or a revocable living trust, which can be prepared by your Washington lawyer, but title to that property out of state, Arizona, Idaho, wherever, is going to need to be done by a lawyer licensed in that state. And when you put that property into your revocable living trust, it will avoid probate in those jurisdictions. So when you have property in more than one state, definitely see your estate planning lawyer.